Hello and welcome back to another episode on the podcast. This week I am doing a special guest episode, so it is going to be like an Arla episode. If you don't know, I am the co-founder of a company, I am Arla, and what we essentially do is create safe spaces for survivors of gender-based trauma. So this week I decided to upload a special guest episode with my other co-founder Devika and Carina Talla. So Carina is an inner child healing coach. She is absolutely amazing. She has overcome so much, and this episode is so inspiring. But what's really beautiful is she does a lot of work around inner child healing, so that women can overcome anxiety, manage emotions with ease, and take control of their life. So this is such a beautiful episode, and it's so exciting to be able to do these special guest episodes with me and Devika and just, align our passions and have a space where we can talk about things. So I hope that you enjoy this week's episode and you take something from it. Hello, Carina. Welcome to the podcast episode. How are you doing?
I'm amazing and much happy to see both your faces here tonight.
Introduce yourself, please, for the listeners. I know we've just had a lovely little catch up before I press record, but just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So my name is Carina Talla and I am an inner child healing coach. So I specialize helping women overcoming childhood trauma that is still affecting their mental health today.
I love that. And one of the things I know me and Dev wanted to talk about in this episode, and the reason why we asked you to be on the podcast was because your story is so inspirational, and I know that it will resonate with so many listeners. So can you tell us a little bit about the story that led you to being the woman that you are today?
How long have you got? I'll do the short version. So yeah, obviously, if the work I do in a child healing and childhood trauma is very specialist. I think you only really get into this work to this depth if you are able to relate and have gone through a healing journey yourself, overcoming it. So my journey started with me healing from my own childhood trauma. So my mum had me, I think was in her 20s, not even 21 yet. Right. So when my mum was with my dad and that whole journey began, that was when the domestic violence had already started. So I think when I was already in the womb, it was around and happening, and I was just born into it. And my mom was so young and vulnerable, needing to survive. I'm born 1 year later, and my earliest childhood memories are just so violent and so graphic and so gory. It was really difficult because I'm an only child, so I didn't have anyone to protect me, even if it was a sibling or anyone to speak about it, to say, hey, is this normal, what's going on, or how it even felt. So I'm so many of my deepest childhood memories, I'm just alone. I've been picked up by an adult in the middle of the night because the house would be empty if my mum's in hospital, my dad's been taken to the police. Just that fear would never leave me, and it was just really difficult times. I think when you have an alcoholic parent, you just never know what's coming. And as a child, have to be so hyper vigilant of your surroundings, people's facial expressions, their mood, their tone of voice from such a young age. It just gives you a sixth sense from the beginning of your life, but not in a nice way, in a way of survival. So it was really difficult. And it's interesting because when I look back, obviously as you're a child, the adults look so much older around you, right? But actually, my mom was 24, 25 when those key things were happening, which is 3 years younger than I am now. I think, my God, to go through all of that with a small child and being in a country that you don't know, with a whole new culture and having to survive through this. So it's so interesting because the inner child perspective is these big grown adults. But yeah, she was 24. That time I was about 4 years old and my dad was 30. It's just crazy. So the perspective is quite interesting. But those core childhood experiences obviously have a deep impact on you as a person. During 0 to 7 are the most vital times of your subconscious development, where we pick up our core beliefs about the world and who we are, and if we're worthy of love, if we're worthy of safety and protection, of if we even belong in the world. I think so much from those deep, core initial patterns is that for a long time throughout my teenage years, they really surfaced. And I had this deep sense of just not meaning, like, I wasn't meant to be here. Like, I shouldn't be here. Like, I don't deserve life. And like that comes deep from my younger years of never feeling safe, not trusting anyone, not knowing who was going to harm you, who wasn't, and just seeing so much chaos around me. So it was difficult because the teenage years, the PTSD was so extreme. I'd always had it through my childhood, but I didn't really know what it was, because you don't know you're in trauma. You really have no idea. Like, I wasn't even a really sad kid. I was genuinely like an okay, happy kid at times, because you don't know that that's not normal. So what have you got to judge it against? You've got nothing to compare it to. It wasn't until my teenage years where I started going to friends' houses and started being like, wait, what? You've got like two parents here and no one's fighting and no one's like smashing things, and it's safe when you go to sleep at night. This doesn't feel the same in my house. And I just started to question for the first time, what's going on? What is going on? Why is it so different where I live and where I come from? It was hard at that time because from about 12 to 20, I really struggled with addiction. But it's just a coping mechanism when you don't have any other tools. That's all it is. You're just numbing like the parts of you that are so afraid or feel so unloved, just with something else. So when healing came into my life is when I got chronically sick from around age 20. My body just completely shut down. And I was in bed for nearly a year, could hardly walk across a room. I became intolerant to every single food you can imagine. I couldn't even eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe. It was just like the worst time. But that was my wake-up call to like, you need to look at this, because your body is so sick. You're holding on to so much trauma for the first 20 years of your life. And now it's starting to physically show. And that was really scary, because I always was kind of able to hide what was really going on underneath. So when the physical body starts speaking, you got nowhere to hide now. Especially when you can't even run or move or walk and you're stuck in bed 24 hours a day. And I remember the view is like me in the bed, window to the left of the room. And that was just my view for a whole year. And Instagram was not a thing with health or healing. I couldn't just go on like a coach's account and read some tips. It was like fucking books from Waterstones in the back of the self-help section. It was like this big. That was not thriving at that time. So it was just crazy. So a lot of it was just like, I was kind of try to go on YouTube and I would Google random things, just trying to figure out like, how do I start holistically healing? How do I start healing? So the path was a long journey, and it took me to things such as Ayurvedic medicine and shamanism and plant medicines and therapy, and like from the esoteric to the grounded practical stuff. Like I've just explored it all, really trying to find ways to heal, to overcome trauma, overcome PTSD, because it was so severe for so long. And I worked with trauma specialists, best specialists in London, that were like, we don't know what to do with you. Like, we're sorry, but we actually don't know what to do with you, because nothing was working. The EDMR things I'm using, things attached to my head, like nothing was working. I was like, the memories are so severe, nothing is even shifting anything in my subconscious mind. So that was super scary, because I was like, I'm fucked. I'm absolutely fucked. I don't know how I'm going to get over this. And what is so fascinating is that it wasn't until I started doing the actual inner child healing work and reprogramming the trauma through the inner child perspective. For example, say a key memory where domestic violence was happening that would keep flashing up in my mind, or the visions I would see. I would actually, very simple, just in inner child healing, is that you actually visualize you're in the scene again, but as your adult self, and you go to save that child that is going through that experience. So I would visualize me, adult me today, going into the scene, picking up my younger self, giving her what she needed, parenting, safety, love, rescuing her out of it. And your subconscious mind actually overrides the emotional experience, visceral and emotional in your body. So you don't feel that feeling of deep trauma or fear, but you replaced it with safety, with parenting, with nurturing, giving yourself those parts that were needing that at the time. So with the inner child healing, I just kept going over and over different memories, different key aspects that kept coming up. And the PTSD like healed. I don't get flashbacks anymore. And I had them my whole life. Couldn't sleep because of it. Wake up, would dread another day because of it. And it's just incredible. So I'm just like, what, how and why would so many of these key trauma specialist practices not working for me, for the best specialists in London? And when this inner child healing piece came in, literally healed. Like I don't get anxious. I don't feel like fear like at all like I used to. I sleep well, my digestion's good, I got my health back. Like I was told by doctors, you're not gonna get any of your health back, you gotta cope. Like they're all fucking wrong. It's like you can heal. It's just finding the thing I think maybe works for you the most. And I feel like when you've had childhood trauma, inner child healing is just so powerful. It really, really is, in a different way, that some things are quite clinical and cold, and like you're just seen as another number. But I think within a child healing, like you learn how to actually nurture yourself. You're not relying on someone else. It's you from you. And I think that is what truly heals the inner child. They don't want love from anyone else. They want it from a random doctor. Like they want it from you, So the journey's been a long one, but I'm here to tell the tale. And I'm good. Life is good now, So you can overcome these things. But yeah, it's been a ride for sure.
Like I'm literally, I mean, I don't know about you, Liz, but I'm like in awe of you right now. I think, oh my God, my face probably said it all. I was just listening to you, so captured by everything you were saying. Yeah, you're just incredible, inspiring, and what you've managed to overcome and go on to now help others who have gone through the same thing is just absolutely incredible. I think it's so interesting that you said about the whole the manifestation of the trauma into your physical self. That was one of the things that I experienced and realized when things were really bad, that my trauma had really come to the forefront, because I used to just push it down. I just never even used to admit that I'd been in a domestic abuse relationship, let alone multiple domestic abusive relationships. And for me, I was constantly in that fight and flight. Like you said, my body was basically just, I think, gradually going in on itself and shutting down and doing things that were basically saying, Dev, you need to sort this out and bring this to the surface. And I used to have what I would say is an eating disorder, because I just never was able to eat because I was so anxious all the time. I had this horrible pit in the bottom of my stomach where I just constantly felt sick. Like I just physically couldn't get anything down me. Like even drinking water, I'd get dry mouth 24/7. And it was like the worst feeling. And then it all suddenly kind of manifested out. My hair just fell out, literally fell out. I had such nice, thick, long hair. And then all of a sudden, I think over this period of like 4 weeks, it just suddenly went from being thick and long to just non-existent. And I started putting hair extensions in because I was like, oh, let's cover it up again. Let's tape over the trauma, which is what I'm really good at doing, by the way. Literally tape over the trauma. I was like, get those extensions in. And yeah, it's just so, it's nice. I say it's nice. It's for me, someone that's a survivor of, a form of trauma, hearing somebody else talk about the fact that it manifested in that way makes me feel like it wasn't just me going through it. And it's crazy that even now I'm 33 and all of that happened before. It just isn't spoken about enough. And when I do hear it, even now, when I hear people that have overcome it and things that they experienced and how their body manifested their trauma, I still sit here and go, oh, it wasn't just me. I'm not alone. I don't feel like the odd one out. And it's just so like a familiar, lovely feeling, the warm feeling that I get, which is weird because I'm saying that based on someone else going through trauma. And I'm like, I feel warm. But I'm sure
I get it completely. Yeah. It's a connection, it's that deeper connection of like, oh, we can relate to a part of the story of our lives.
Yeah, you can relate. That's the word. That's the key word. It's the relation piece. And I think also when you were mentioning around the trying to find what works for you, And you realized that the inner child healing was the thing that really made you realize this is how I can nurture myself, through nurturing literally myself through my older self. I can bring myself back into a healthy adulthood that I deserve. That's one of the things that's so important. It's about finding what's right for you and your trauma. And it might not be that clinical counselor or therapist that the doctor, the GP referred you to give you that half an hour or 45 minutes of, I want you to remember that trauma and I want you to relive it and I want you to tell me what happened in your childhood and keep talking to me about it, because that doesn't always help everyone. And I think it's so important that you went on that journey. And I think a lot of people don't go through that journey of trying to find what's right for them, because they think that the prescriptive thing is, I should go see a therapist and it should be this type of therapist and I need to do this sort of treatment because the doctor said I should. And they end up staying in a state of trauma for a really long time because it doesn't help them. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just
I think that's also what's really amazing about the world we live in today, is that we do have more options now. We do have more options to be able to explore outside of traditional methods, and I think they all really like perfectly complement each other. I don't think it's only inner child healing that will save your life. It's not only psychotherapy, it's not only spiritual practice, not only Western practices. I think they are all complementary to support each other. And I think uniting those forces is so important, because I wouldn't say it's just only the inner child aspect. There's so many other parts that I've had, like for example, healing my physical body. I needed the Ayurvedic medicine, I needed herbal medicine, I needed cleansing, I needed detoxing. That helped me heal the physical side. And you've got the emotional, mental, spiritual, like it's all combined. And I think the way my journey unfolded is, I actually remember so clearly, after seeing specialist number 5,000 at this point, this is for my physical health, and then just saying the same fucking thing, same goddamn prescription. I was just like, I cannot even believe it. I'm just so disappointed in the whole system at that time, right? This is my inner teenager speaking. I just had it by that point. And
you're all wrong.
And I just remember being like, wow, I'm like 19. At this point, my health is completely deteriorating. The first time I went to the doctor for mental health, I was 12 years old, and they had already diagnosed me with depression. Because already at that age, I was saying like I wanted to die. And my mom was like, I don't know what the hell to do with you or do with this. So I got taken to the doctor, and they were just like, okay, answer the questionnaire form. Scale of 1 to 10, how depressed are you? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want to harm yourself or others? All the things. I'm like 100 out of 100 on the mark. Like, here you go, here's a prescription. And that was like it. But it's interesting because despite how much I suffered with my mental health for so long, I never actually took a prescription for antidepressants or even anti-anxiety medication. I was really, really headstrong and refused, which is strange because I didn't know anything about health or healing. It wasn't even in my vocabulary back then. But something inside my spirit was like, you need to figure this out a different way. You need to try, because the journey is leading you somewhere different. And if you take these medications, you're never going to figure out how to heal yourself naturally. You're never going to know what you actually feel like deep down. You need to do this a different way. So it was raw, because I'm sure actually if I take the medication, maybe it would have helped numb some aspects. But I think part of my gift and the way I'm able to help people today is that I've never not felt everything. I felt it all from the beginning of my life to this point. I've had to face every painful emotion, every shadow, every trauma head on. And you get so much courage from that. But I do feel that is so much improvement that does need to be made in these systems. It's not enough to give a vulnerable child, teenager, woman or man just a questionnaire and then hand them over a prescription. There is no aid in that. Not once did any of the doctors ask, what's your home life like? Do you have any support? How was your childhood? What are you eating? How are you looking after yourself? Like all of these things need to be considered when healing. So it was hard, because it was nearly 10 years of feeling so let down by the medical system. It's not anyone's fault, but that little girl within me that was so desperate for this like fantasy rescuer, to someone to just come and save her from all this mess. And when you're like that, you think it's the doctor, you think it's the system, and when they can't, it's really difficult. So I think that gives you a push to just figure out your own way. But I do remember that whole time of like just seeing another appointment and it just being such a failure. And I remember this point, I was like, I'm going to become my own doctor. I said it loud and clear. I'm going to just do it myself. And if none of you can help me after nearly 10 years, what the hell am I doing here? Like, I am done. And honestly, after that moment, that was when everything kind of took off. I'm like studying every single modality under the planet. I'm obsessed. Like, I'm just, I just want it all. I want it all. I want to know everything to heal myself first. Like, I didn't ever choose this path. I was studying design and fashion at university. I had no idea I was going to go into healing. This was, I think healing, like, you don't choose it chooses you. It's like you, Lydia, told your story earlier, It just, if it's part of your destiny and your purpose, you have no other choice but to surrender to the calling, because you just can't get away from it once it's started. But I think, we have so many more options now, which is amazing. So I think everyone needs to just find what works for them, and also find the thing that you also enjoy. Obviously, at the first stages of healing, it's not enjoyable. It can feel really difficult and heavy. But over time, healing shouldn't feel like that. There is a point where you need to start emerging into the light, where you actually start reclaiming joy and happiness and playfulness and sensitivity and passion for life again, because trauma takes that away from you.
Oh God,
doesn't it just?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You lose all the enjoyment in little things. And I feel I don't have any regrets. Never. I've never had any regrets. I always even say that the trauma that I experienced, I was meant to have experienced it because it led me to become the person that I am. And I don't think if I'd not gone through it, maybe I wouldn't be as strong, as resilient, or created things like I am Arla, or even having this chat today would never have happened, right? The universe meant it to happen in some way. But my God, did it strip me of fun for those 10 years while I was dealing with my trauma. Like, I just remember, like, I never used to find joy in anything. Like getting up in the day, I just feel just really sad all the time. And like, I would hate things like holiday periods because I was in an abusive relationship, or the guy that I was with, or would be nasty to me, or cheat on me, or do something that was horrible. And it would just constantly make me just not enjoy life. And like food, for one thing, was like, I never used to eat, and I never had enjoyment in food. And now I've got that enjoyment back, and it's like I've gone probably the other way. Like, I love eating. I love that for me. I love that journey for me. But you know what's so weird? Like, this is one of my like inside things, and I've never admitted this to anyone.
You're safe with us, let it out.
You heard this here first. I had an obsession with reading horoscopes, and not just any horoscope, the Metro horoscope. So it would be my one thing where I'd say, if the Metro horoscope said something, I would completely believe in it. So I would run onto the train in the morning on the tube, and I would run to like read the Capricorn, which is my star sign. And if it said something, I would hold on to that, and I'd find any meaning within that horoscope to give me hope for that day. That's maybe quite sad, but also like a little like insight into like my maybe like nuances of how people deal with trauma. And that was mine, which is like, I find it really strange, because like, it was like, if I didn't manage to get hold of a Metro newspaper, I'd get really like, I need to read my horoscope because it needs to tell me like something good's gonna happen today, or tell me how my day's gonna go. I don't have that obsession anymore, don't worry, but it was like, thank you Metro, whoever wrote
Metro. Oh, I love that thing. Is this kind of sweet, because it's just like that spark of hope.
That's it.
Of guidance. What we want as humans, we just want someone to tell us that it's going to be okay, that everything's going to work out, that good things are coming, and we can find it in different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
How are you two both feeling at the moment talking about it? Is anything like coming up? Because I think one of the things I was thinking about this conversation is, I wonder for people listening to it if it could reignite some stuff. So how are you two finding it in space, talking about what you're talking about, like being out of it and almost reflecting on it?
I think, honestly, personally for me, I don't get any emotional triggers anymore. I used to, but I've spent a lot of years, not like months, years, trying to clear this and clearing it and clearing those patterns. So when I talk about it, it's coming from the scar, not the wound, is the only way I can describe it. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to talk about it. I wouldn't be able to bring it up. I wouldn't. So it comes from a space of, I would say, strength and empowerment now. Obviously, some moments you get little glimpses of like, wow, that was actually my life. And sometimes you ever find that with trauma, because you have like the time you were living it, and then the time after you're like, whoa, what the hell was that? Like, did that
out of world experience
happen? Yeah. It's crazy. And I think I will be honest as well. I feel with my own story and journey and all the experience that happened, I've had to talk about it so much within myself, or I've journaled about it. I spoke with the therapist about it, or other practitioners. So I've gone through those stages of when I would first even think about it, I couldn't get my words out and I'd be choking up and I'd be crying and I'd just be so emotional. But I've had to work through that to get to this point. So it feels good now, but also I also have to be careful within my own self to not desensitize it either. There's like a sense of numbing a little bit at times, because it's like, it's a lot at the same time. So for me, on my own personal, when I'm talking about it as well, I have to be like, okay, still have empathy and compassion for yourself, because this is like big topics too, to not detach from it too much, as opposed to, you know, giving it the respect that it deserves, because it takes a lot of work to own your story. A lot of work, but when you get there, it's beautiful, because you can be from that healed space. So emotional triggers not so much, but then to anyone listening that may be feeling that trigger, you know, just remember to hold your body in that safe, loving, compassionate way, to breathe, to remind yourself that what you're listening to is for hope and inspiration, that you too also can heal, that it actually is possible to get to the other side. And I do believe healing has like an end date, in a sense, the hardest parts, like you know, for example, you've like eating again and feeling joy for life. It's like you're on the other side now. Like us humans, we're always growing and evolving and developing, and I think that in itself is the lifelong journey. If you choose it to be, you don't have to, but that initial depth of healing from trauma, like, it does have a time limit. So just keep going and believe in yourself. Whoever needs to hear that as well. So yeah, that's my input.
So true. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I think for me, I still very much, I find it hard to think back, and like, I think like you just said, Carina, like, I feel like it's a bit of an out of body experience. I'm like, was that actually, was that me? I feel sad for that girl. That was me. I sometimes look back, and it's so weird that you say about the inner child and pieces like that, because when I'm feeling sad or feeling triggered, my brain has this image of me as a child sat on a staircase in my old house holding a teddy bear, and I can see her. And when I'm sad and I get triggered, that's the image that's in my head. This image hasn't got anything to do with my domestic abuse, because my domestic abuse was when I was in my late teens, early 20s, all through my 20s. So there's no connection to it. But the inner child thing is so strong, because that's who I'm trying to protect. It doesn't necessarily mean that my inner child was that age. It's just that she was younger than how I am now. And so when we were talking about it then, that was coming up for me, and talking about, you know, being rid of joys and not experiencing joy through my 20s. That's sad. And I sit in that sadness and I think like, oh, wow, like, why did I not get to enjoy those 20s that I should have deserved to have had? And so should so many women who experience trauma. And I'm pretty certain everyone and anyone listening to this will probably have similar feelings of like, I feel sad and I mourn the loss of those years I could have had. And so even though I've spoken about my story a lot, I probably haven't done as much work as you've done, Carina, because this is now this is your job. this is your calling. This is what you do. And it's not mine. And I don't think I've fully ever sat with it and probably reflected on it and healed from it fully, and even shared half the things that I went through. Like, you know, lots of stuff has never even been spoken about, nor have I even spoken about it to myself. So even though I've shared my story and I've spoken about my story on numerous platforms, and obviously I Am Arla started with sharing my story, I feel like that story was a glimpse into the actual story of like the chapter of the book that was the trauma that I went through. But I think saying that, like you said, it has an end point, and creating that story and writing that story and sharing that story was a huge part of me on that journey of healing from my trauma. And if I hadn't shared that story and been able to talk about it and get the words out without crying, I would never be here where I am now. It's like you need to be able to eloquently share it and hold that space for the story before you can even try to move forward. But it is a journey and a half, isn't it? It's like it is I feel like it is so important to find space to have conversations like this and speak about it, because I think so many people, and you both will know this, Lydia and Carina, because you obviously work with hundreds of women who probably go through a lot of these things, but I just feel sad for anyone that hasn't got to the point where they're able to even start to think about healing, because everyone deserves it. And it saddens me to think that people are sat in silence and not able to have space to hold their trauma and what they went through.
I think from a psychotherapist perspective, what you were saying about being able to like talk through the story, it's almost like building that window of tolerance to it, like personally with yourself. And I think it's also okay, like I say to my clients, if some pieces of it, maybe it's too uncomfortable to even like increase that window of tolerance. So that's basically like your ability and your nervous system's ability to hold that trauma and be with that trauma and not completely like activate you or like shut you down. And sometimes I'll be with clients in sessions and they feel like they need to talk about certain aspects of the trauma. And I'm like, you don't need to talk about the things that you don't feel like you're ready to talk about. And I think just even people knowing that, and knowing as well that, I mean, from my perspective, I never force a client to go into the story. So also listening to people listening to this, knowing that you can process your trauma and you can heal parts of your trauma without needing to go into all of the details, without needing to share all of the graphic stuff about your trauma, without needing to go into those deepest, darkest parts of you. You know, sometimes my like clients I work with, they'll process that privately in between space and then they'll come back, and there's so much more tolerance to be able to sit with that, and then they can like be more connected in their body, and you really see that, and it's so beautiful. But it's like for me it's a privilege when somebody shares their trauma. Like it's not a requirement. It's not something that I ask them to do. I don't ask them to share the story. It's such a privilege and a gift to witness them being able to hold that and share that if they want to. So I think that's also important as well, because I work with so many women who go like, oh, I'm just going to tell you the story. And I'm like, oh my God, like you don't need to do that. And a lot of the time they'll just come in on the first session and just be like, so here's all my trauma and just tell me it all. And I can really notice them getting like super activated or really starting to like disassociate and disconnect in sessions. And I'm like, okay, that's when you were both talking before about like the space not being held properly. I'm just like, how do people not know how to work with trauma? Like we're in 2023, like what is happening? And I just think like sometimes people just need that reminded as well, because it can put them so much at ease.
Oh, I love that you shared that. That's such an important piece. Oh, completely. And this is when trauma-formed work is held with safety and responsibility. And you don't actually need to relive the traumas, like you said. I love that you've mentioned that. This is so important, because even from the inner child healing perspective, if I ever check in with my client, even before we started, like, do you have anything you may be worried about, apprehension before starting? And always the thing they say is, I'm scared to talk about the trauma. I'm scared to have to relive it. I'm like, you actually don't have to. They're like, what? But this is childhood trauma healing. I'm like, we don't actually have to talk about it. Not yet. Not if you don't want to. And because even with the inner child piece, the inner child, it is so sensitive and raw to relive those formative experiences, because they were so huge for a child to have experienced, let alone what adults go through. For a child to carry that level of trauma is just beyond what any human should have to hold in their body, their nervous system, etc. So often what the inner child needs when we're going through these visualizations and reprogramming, they just need the safety and the love and the care and compassion. Like a child doesn't need to have a big video screen reminder of everything that it went through, like unless the adult's ready to do that at a later day. So what's so beautiful is that the inner child healing journey, it doesn't have to be just like the darkness and the shadows. It's actually just like parenting that little part of you, bringing them the safety that they needed. And that's so important. So I think old-fashioned ways of healing from trauma are hopefully leaving and staying in the times they need to stay in, and progressively moving forward is safer trauma healing experiences, like, you know, Lydia yourself is holding, and what women deserve, because it should be a journey that you feel proud of and that is bringing you strength and empowerment, not depleting you, not hurting you more. So I think when spaces are held safely, that can be achieved. And I think, as I've been in spaces where it hasn't been safe for me to be held by certain practitioners, I'm like, how are you even allowed to do this? Like, you know, just because someone
Lydia has such a thing with this.
Oh my God, it's a thing. It's a thing.
Like, it literally infuriates me. Like, it's just the amount of times I just sit like shocked in sessions with people. Like, I recently had a client say to me, she was talking about disassociation but didn't know obviously what it was, and she's had so many rounds of therapy, and she was like, and the therapist told me that that's not a thing. And I just sat there and I was like, and it was a childhood memory as well, and I was like, you have fully disassociated in that experience. And she was like, oh, I don't even know like what that is or what that means. And I just sit there and I'm like, how are these people given like CBT or EDMR specifically for trauma, for PTSD, and nobody has explained that that's a symptom of it? So this is something in like the I Am Arla directory piece that I am like, we need like safe practitioners, because it's not even just important, it's like necessary for people to be held in the correct spaces. And like, one of the things I always say to clients, when you were both saying then about, you know, that feeling of it being hard in sessions with clients, I never ever let a client leave and she's in the thick of the trauma. Like, I always bring it into a resource, and I always bring it into a glimmer. She never leaves the session activated. She never leaves like in trauma time. And the experiences that clients have told me where they're just like, I was literally having flashbacks after the session, and like I was not resourced to cope with it. And I'm like, that's just adding trauma onto the trauma. Like, that's re-traumatizing again. Like, it's not okay. So again, anyone listening to this who is or wants to process trauma, you should never, ever, ever leave a session activated in your trauma. And if you are, please leave that practitioner.
I had that.
Yeah.
With every counselor and therapist that I got sent to, I would always end up in fits of tears and hysterics, and I would sit across from them and they would do the standard like you know,
and they're checking the time as well.
Yeah,
do you have
they're
that
looking at the clock. They're looking at the clock, and you're sat there going, okay, I need to hurry up now. Okay, all right, okay, pull yourself together, Dev. And they'd hand you the box of tissues, and then they'd be like, so the session's up now. So
that's terrific.
Just remember that, you know, it's going to be hard. I recommend you don't go out now. Try not to drink alcohol. Go home and get some water and go to bed.
You probably want to go and pick a bottle of wine up on the way home. And
take a bottle of wine up. I probably wanted to douse myself in any sort of like antidepressant and jump off a bridge somewhere by the end of half the session.
Oh my God.
It's true. This is the thing, right? Honestly, I can relate to all of this so much. I would just walk home crying after seeing my therapist, like, all the way home. Sort of like, you just feel so more like, you feel more fucked up after, which is so terrible. Sad. But yeah, but coming back to Lydia kind of mentioning, okay, if you ever feel like that with a counselor or therapist, like, leave. I think what we really need to be asking coaches or psychotherapists or whoever we're working with, are you somatically trained? Do you understand the polyvagal theory? Are you trained in nervous system somatics? I think that's the only question we need to be additionally asking, because if they say yes, then you're never going to face that problem.
No.
Ever. No. But because traditional methods are not trained or even believe that the nervous system is a thing, like your standard GP does not even believe that your mind is connected to your body, let alone that the nervous system is connected to trauma and stress. Like, there's a reality right now that is still happening in our systems. So it's really, really hard to find an abundance of somatically trained therapists. However, you've got two here and you're helping as well. So I think that's like also what needs to be pushed and encouraged, is understanding this nervous system and the safety aspect of it, because you'll just feel more traumatized after every session that you go to. And that's just so sad. You know, we just don't need that. And also a waste of money. Oh my God. Yeah, how much do we invest just to feel worse after?
That's the thing. That's the thing. I'd always leave and I'd be like, I've just spent £50 to just cry and come out of it and feel even worse about my life. And all I wanted to do was like go in, feel like I was practically making steps forward, and at least leaving feeling more empowered and slightly less on the like fight or flight sort of, you know,
side.
Yeah. And I'd always leave feeling traumatized, and I just found it so unhealthy, and it just did not work for me. And I feel like genuinely that is what added to my trauma not being healed for so many years. And it was only because I started like looking into things like yoga, which is not even, I mean, that's just the bare minimum people should be doing to try and help themselves, I think, if their body is feeling, you know, tired or worn out.
You know, though, sorry to interrupt, yoga is fucking incredible for trauma healing. Vessel Vander, what's his name? The Body Keeps the Score. There's a full chapter, or like a chapter about yoga, because it is a somatic practice, but more the traditional forms of new yoga, not the fucking Western power yoga that we see in like £40 in London for some obscene reason. They talk about like traditional yoga and how it is so incredible for healing trauma because it's so connected to the nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It does help me as well massively. That's part of Ayurvedic medicine, and that was one of the sciences. Well, it's the world's oldest holistic health system that all medicines derive from, and that's partly how I started healing my physical body that I mentioned earlier, and my health, and yoga was part of it. And all the practices they mentioned, they're just incredible. Even I was training in India, and I was living out there for 3 months in the jungle, and it was just incredible. But the doctors there, they are just so wise, and they're like, the nervous system, we've known about this for 5,000 years. Like, they laugh at us Westerners. They're like, you guys think you're catching on to the gut microbiome and all this stuff. We've known this since before Jesus Christ was walking this planet. We have known this. Like, come on, people, let's catch up. You know, it's like incredible, and it's so funny. It's just amazing. But it's everything. The Vedas have been teaching since the beginning of time. Your mind and body are one. The nervous system influences your mood, your thoughts, your beliefs, the way you give and receive love. Like, Ayurvedic's very spiritual and quite poetic in the way that it explains the sciencey things as well, which is so beautiful. But it really comes down to like your home, your body is the vessel for that spirit inside, and how you nurturing, taking care of it. And it even goes to extend how, you know, our nervous system obviously connects to the human bodies around us, how we interact with each other, nature, seasons, environment, times of day, everything. So much of my background and training in that really helped me from a deeper understanding, from even the trauma perspective. You know, even depending on the trauma, what time of year did you go through it? Was it day or night time? How these affect our psyche so deeply as well, and how we're so connected to environments, times, and sounds is so powerful. So everything's connected, and the more we understand that, I think it's going to be easier to heal as well when we really see it all as one. It's just so important.
I think there's something so beautiful about co-regulation, and I'm sure in your work as well, it's like you being the co-regulator for other people so they can really like dial into that and find safety. And I think even for me, that's been such a profound like shift from taking it, like I say, it's not a job what I do, it's like a way of being, because it's so much about me is like facilitating like a somatic experience, so then like my clients can really tune into that. And it's amazing. It leaves an imprint on everything. So for you, how do you help? I mean, you've touched on it somewhat, but like, how do you help women with inner child healing and trauma and somatics and all of that gorgeous stuff?
So over the past 4 years, I've been practicing and working on refining my method for inner child healing specifically, because the traditional aspects of like my trainings in inner child healing is so broad and so complex. There's so many layers. I'm like, this is just not tangible when you are in trauma yourself. Like, we need simple clarity, clear steps. So I really reflect on for so long, what are the key things that really help me heal my own inner child, and the combinations of the different trainings I've done, whether that's East or Western philosophies and practices, and just really drawing it in. So I created a really simple 12-step method that I guide my clients through. So we work together for a minimum of 12 weeks, one-to-one in coaching, or I teach it through my group program as well. And we just go through those simple steps. So step one is literally safety first and calming your nervous system. So we just start off, before we even look at anything to do with the inner child, we are learning about the nervous system, somatic aspect, how to self-regulate, co-regulate, how to also really understand your body's triggers and how to process them before you even touch anything else. Step two is self-care rituals and routines. So before, again, we've even talked about anything to do with the inner child, or like, okay, what is your lifestyle like? Morning rituals, bedtime rituals, practice throughout the day. Because often when you've had childhood trauma, you've never had a structured, organized routine by parents. You wake up whenever you want, you go to bed whenever you want, often at the late hours of the night or waking up late in the day. There's never been like solid foundations, very unstable. So your nervous system gets very conditioned to chaos and irregularity just from simply your lifestyle growing up, let alone the trauma around it. So step two is very much, okay, like, let's actually parent ourselves. Like, actually, you know, bedtime, meal times, everything. So that's actually a really fun part that my clients love, because it's like lifestyle makeover and transformation, and you feel it's exciting. So step three is then healing your inner child. So this is when we start looking at the core wounds that the inner child carries, you know, whether it's guilt or abandonment or fear, neglect, the emotional wounds that create our patterns in adulthood. Start helping my clients to understand and identify, actually, okay, like, where are my core wounds and the adult behaviors coming from? Then we look at the three inner child types, which are the blocked inner child, fantasy inner child, and the what I call the happy inner child. So you start really understanding, okay, where are you? Where is your inner child emotional type right now? And that can be really helpful. Those that have been through severe trauma in their childhood growing up will often identify with the blocked inner child more. So this is where addictions can fall into place, low self-esteem, self-harm, depression, anger, rage, loss of control, you know, all those kind of like deeper mental and emotional imbalances we may deal with. Fantasy inner child, it's often those that haven't had severe inner child trauma, but often suffered lack of emotional validation or regulation growing up from their parents. So the fantasy inner child can very much have this sense of somebody else is going to come and save me, whether it's a partner, whether it's winning the manifesting the fucking lottery, or just something like that. It's like something outside of me is going to come take me away from all my problems. I don't have to lift a finger. Someone else is going to come and do it. That the fantasy inner child as well, we can really still idolize our parents and really put ourselves last on the list. So we might be living for validation and approval of our parents or others, not really making decisions what we want to do, but doing it because our parents want us to do it. So it's this fantasy inner child inside the adult body, still looking for that validation from others. And obviously a lot to it, but those two types are kind of funneled down just quite simply. And then of course the happy inner child is when that little inner child starts healing and you start being able to, you know, reconnect to joy and happiness and playfulness, and you're able to use your voice, set your boundaries, speak your needs, you know, connect to creativity, and just also like the seriousness of life just kind of melts a little bit. It's like playfulness comes back, and that little inner child spark is kind of through everything that you do. So that's quite helpful at step three, because you just get to have a more sense of understanding. And then I'll go through them quite quickly, but then you've got step four, which is reparenting yourself and meeting your needs. So we then look at the core emotional needs growing up that may have not been met, and then I teach my clients how to start meeting them. So there are different core needs that we all need as humans, every single person, and if we don't have them met, then we'll have certain adult behaviors in life that we'll struggle with and patterns. So that's really, really powerful and an important part of the process. So with inner child healing, I should have said at the beginning, but it's not just your infant self. It is 0 to 18 years old. So it's all your key stages of childhood development. So you kind of go from like obviously newborn, well, pregnancy, really, conception and pregnancy is where it all begins. Everything is still programmed in your subconscious mind from that point. So for example, a client may know that their mother had a really troubled pregnancy, but in fact their childhood is okay, and so is their teenage years, but they still have this deep sense of pain or depression or anxiety, and it's actually all the way probably from those pregnancy stages. So through understanding what the needs were, etc., we can even go back as far as then through parenting that part of their psyche. So that's beautiful. We then start moving into feeling your feelings, which is step 5. So all about emotional regulation, actually meeting and understanding your emotions. So this is such an exciting part, because I guide my client to visually see them almost as like little characters and get to know them, and I get them to visualize their inner child meeting their emotions for the first time as well, and like having a conversation with your inner child, like, this is anger, this is sadness, this is happiness, and this is what we say to them when they feel sad or upset, and like you would literally to an actual child. So that's so important. We then look at boundaries and communication and repair. So important, right? Actually, how to stand up for yourself, how to set boundaries with people that need it. But the important aspect of this is obviously communication skills, also repair skills. So much of intergenerational trauma just has no repair. It's just pain after pain. No one knows how to communicate. No one knows how to protect each other and themselves, and there's just no repair in it. So that piece is really important. We then look into mindset. Okay, so flipping over our deep entrenched negative thought patterns that we've had since we were children, and start learning how to heal them and repair them. We look into belief systems. There's so much in here. How to reframe your core limiting beliefs picked up from childhood as well that are still affecting you. And then our later steps: self-love, self-worth, self-confidence, all the things. And then the last one is connecting to your higher self. So I won't go into all of them into detail because there was a lot in there, but just giving you a kind of brief kind of background of those 12 steps, because by the time you've gone through those and you really start to understand them, you've covered a good foundational, what I always say, like the introduction to healing. It's like those first 12 steps, and then once you've covered those bases, it's a good understanding. But I'll often work with my clients for a few months depending on the trauma. If it's deep experiences they've had that need a lot of healing, it can be a minimum sometimes of 6 months to really give that good basis and to understand it. So that's a little bit of the background, but through that we do the subconscious reprogramming, the emotional releasing, reprogramming the memories, reparenting their younger self, and it's incredible the change that can happen even in a short amount of time. Like, it's amazing. It really, really is.
It sounds like I think the biggest thing is the fact that you're taking that person on a journey. So you're allowing that person to go from sitting in it, understanding why and how they've connected to it, and then obviously going through the stages of actually being able to grow into their own self and step into their higher power, which is the bit about when you go through trauma, you're surviving on a daily basis. How do you then go to thrive, and how do you become the best version of yourself? And I'm an avid believer that people that have gone through trauma have some superhuman superpowers, because I feel like if you have overcome that and you're still there standing today, imagine what you can achieve if you can just step into that next phase. Imagine that superhuman power that you've managed to have on that moment of where you're fight and flight. If you can connect that and then step into your next phase, what can you achieve? That's the bit that I always wanted to know, and no one never told me, because I was seeing the bloody doctor and the therapist. What I'm talking about. So well done.
That's incredible. It's so true. It's so true. And I think that bit is so important. So even just that last step, connecting to your higher self, in that, it is so much more than even just the spiritual aspect, but it's also reconnecting to who you were before the trauma. And I always say, even if you've had childhood trauma, there was still a moment, hopefully, in that developmental stage or upbringing where you were a little baby that was still laughing and still smiling and still wanting love and still sleeping and feeling nurtured. Like there was still that part of you that was still love and not touched by trauma yet, and still in its wholeness. And I honestly believe our higher self like is our inner child. That's who we come into the world as, it's who we leave the world as. It stays with you your whole life, and it's like our inner light. I think trauma puts our light out. It doesn't mean the light has gone, it's just the light has been dimmed.
Yeah.
And I think as you go through those stages and those steps, like your light gets brighter from inside, and that's your inner child's light coming back on and shining with the world. But I love what you said about, okay, you could go through all that trauma and survive, then imagine what you can do when you're thriving. And that's like a whole nother conversation. But it's just so important. And even in that higher self piece, like I'm such an advocate for like having fucking fun and just like having joy and like being silly and just being yourself. And in that part, I'm like, okay, like how could we have more fun in your life? Like I give my clients the best fun homeworks when they're at that stage. They're like, this is the best homework ever. Just all the things I get them to do. And they come in sessions smiling and they're laughing. They've had the best time. Like, this is what I want. Like, this is what I want for you to get to a point in your life where life feels good again.
Yeah.
And you're connected to joy, and you can connect to even gratitude. I would never ask my clients to practice gratitude from the beginning of their journeys because it's just ridiculous. Like you're not in a stage to do it. But when you're able to finally get to those final stages within that first just 12-step introduction, and your heart actually starts feeling again, you can start feeling gratitude. It's almost euphoric when it comes back after trauma. It's almost this euphoric feeling where you just come back again. It's amazing. So I think it's, all steps are so important and needed for all types of trauma, not just the childhood aspect, but like yourself, going through a severe adulthood trauma. These steps can still be applied because essentially we have to rediscover ourselves again post those experiences. And what you were saying earlier about seeing your inner child on the step with the teddy bear, I think that's so interesting. And obviously give her so much love and so much care, because even if we go through adulthood trauma, your inner child is still within you. She has also experienced that trauma with you. So that part of you that we all have and always will to the end of our lives, will always have that little inner child that needs love and safety and reassurance. So they go through our adult mess with us, they're still there. So even if it's adult trauma that's the main aspect of someone's healing, inner child healing can still be applied. And I think it should be, because it just connects you to that deeper part of your inner self. So
I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, because it means that my daughter will be able to have platforms like this where she knows if, God forbid, anything was ever going to happen to her, she'll have the resources and people and capabilities to heal and just survive and then thrive. And I think that's the main thing. I think we're never going to be able to completely get rid of trauma happening to anyone. It's the world we live in. But if we can put things in place that can help and support and radically change women's life and help her to heal quicker than I ever did, then my God, are we lucky. And what you created is phenomenal. And you're so inspiring and such a role model to so many women, I can imagine. And I think, I'm just honored to have heard your story and to have been in the space with you as another survivor. But thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for what you're doing, both of you amazing women. I think it's been such an amazing space to connect tonight, and let's keep doing our good work in the world.
One question we do want to end on and ask you is, what is one resource that you would recommend to somebody listening that has helped you on your journey? It can be anything, a book, a podcast, a person.
Oh, good question. I feel like there's so many, I'm not gonna lie. Like there's just this, I think there's some really incredible resources, but I actually feel for someone starting their journey and those very first steps at the very, very beginning, Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, her book, I think it's just like an OG healing resource that I think if you're going to go on the healing path, you got to give respect to where these all started. Okay, this new age concepts, you got to go to Louise. I think her book is so simple. So simple. It couldn't translate these topics just about the inner child and self-love in a simpler way. But I think it just awakens those kind of aspects of your mind that maybe you didn't realize were there before. So if you're starting your journey, I would start with that book. Absolutely.
I love that. And Dev, what would yours be?
The Metro horoscopes.
Yeah.
About this discussion.
Without a doubt.
That would literally, okay, so people listen to this, go and read the Metro horoscopes.
Yeah, do that and let me know. It changes your life. I'm going to stick with that one.
Much.
Lydia, what was yours? What's yours, Lydia?
On my healing journey. There was a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and I remember reading it when I was traveling, and it's tiny little chapters of like little stresses that we just get consumed in. And I remember reading that and thinking, wow, and it changed so much for me. And it wasn't even about healing, it was more about mindset and just how much we stress about that we don't actually need to stress about. And then that was the start of the awakening. And then I read The Power of Now.
Oh,
that's a good one.
That was one of my life-changing ones, actually.
Yeah, The Power of Now was a really big life-changing book. And I remember I didn't understand the words of it when I was reading it, but it made a massive impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Love those. Well,
thank you so much, ladies. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Carina. You are literally so inspiring, and it was such a privilege to listen to your conversation.
Thank you.
Both of you.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Bye.